Good morning, everyone. In today's lesson, we'll go on talking about the Cold War. And we're going to start to talk about the different stages in Cold War. So, for the last few classes, we've already reviewed the relationship between US and USSR before the Cold War, and we use that as a part of the causes of the Cold War. We talk about different ideologies, while they start to suspicious towards each other, and we talk about how US intervened in the Russian Civil War, which laid a basic image between them not a very good one. And also we talk about the time when US during the Second World War they start to expand their military system. And on the other hand, for the USSR, they also started to expand their influence and build a lot of satellite states in the Eastern European countries, right? And last but not the least, when they start to take actions for self-protection, while on one side, USSR adopted the containment policy and they further adopted the Marshall Plan and so. And for on the other hand, when we talk about the USSR, they tighten their control in Europe and they start the Cominform, which is to control the different communist countries. And both sides, they use this kind of economic aid and political influence to support the country to join their allies, right? So remember this photo, it was took in April 1945 when they fight Germany together, like here in this picture, right? But you have to see, this kind of peaceful relationship didn't really last for a long time, right? Because only a year later, in 1946, when Stalin already controlled Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Churchill, he paid a visit to US, and during his visit he gave the very famous speech, the Iron Curtain speech. He mentioned that with the Iron Curtain being an imaginary line that divided the communist East from the capitalist West in Europe, Churchill he suggested an alliance between the US and Britain to prevent further Soviet expansion. This speech further worsened the relations between the two sides because it's about like alliance between Britain and US. Of course, it can be regarded as a great threat to the Soviet Union, right? So Stalin actually seeing it as a deliberately provocative or deliberately trigger of conflicts. And also, this kind of Iron Curtain speech can be marked as the starter of the Cold War. Actually, you can see their relationship with each other actually get worsened day by day, right? You should remember this question, right? Because in February, I gave you a reference book and asked you to read the first topic about the definition of the Cold War and actually how cold was Cold War. This was an essay type question directly from the 2018 Hong Kong DSE history exam. So to answer this question, actually, we need to know different things about the Cold War. For example, we need to know the features and definition of the Cold War. And also, more importantly, we need to use these definition and features to evaluate all the events that happened in the Cold War to see if Cold War was cold or to what extent, to what degree that the Cold War was cold. So we need to know the origin of the Cold War. We already talk about the origins, and also we need to know the development and also the different stages of the Cold War, right? So firstly, you can see this is like a chicken leg here. That means this is like a very important slide of PowerPoint. You need to mark down all the information from this PowerPoint to win a chicken leg in your DSC exam maybe. So the capitalist bloc led by the US and the communist bloc led by USSR. So there were two blocs in the Cold War. You have to know this, and their leader were US for the capitalist bloc while USSR for the communist bloc. So during the time, the two blocs opposed each other on political, economic, and cultural issues. That means except a direct military conflict, like all other means, right? Despite the intensity of their confrontation, both the US and USSR, they feared an outbreak of a nuclear war, what we called MAD, right? The MAD, the mutual assured destruction, right? And thus made every effort to avoid this kind of direct military conflicts. And as a result, it was called a Cold War because it's different from like a hot war like First World War and Second World War, which didn't really include large-scale fight broke out between these two blocs. So if they won't directly fight in the battlefield, how should they fight with each other? Firstly, the economic rivalry. Actually, for this video, we will only focus on the features of the Cold War. So it can be like not very difficult for you because you should already read that part in your book. So you can feel free, if you have like take notes at that time, you can feel free to use that part of notes and upload it to me for this video. So no panic about the thing. It's like a kind of a review for that part to answer the question. So firstly, the economic rivalry. In order to exhibit the supremacy of their economic system, to lure each other, to attract others. It's not only about they are like helping those countries, right? Like for example, last class we talked about the Marshall Plan and we reviewed the map while they giving like support to all different countries in Europe. So those countries, they would join the capitalist bloc, while on the other side, on the Molotov Plan, the Eastern European country also can get support from the USSR. So actually, same kind of things happened nowadays. For example, because of the COVID-19, actually now we have an interesting term called the mask diplomacy, right? So when some country, they greatly support the other country with these masks, actually it's another kind of economic rivalry at nowadays. So at that time, the US carried out the Marshall Plan in Western Europe while the USSR, they carry out the Molotov Plan in Eastern Europe, right? Secondly, they forming opposite military organizations, so they still need to contain each other. They still need to like threaten each other so that neither of them can promote further expansion, right? So the US, they formed the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We still have NATO nowadays. It focuses more on the collaborations among the countries. And also USSR, who established the Warsaw Pact. But actually, Warsaw Pact was already dissolved these days after the dissolve of USSR. Next, the armament race. The two superpowers, they invested a huge amount of money to produce nuclear weapons and develop the other new weapons. So there was competitions in conventional weapons as well as nuclear weapons. Each side, they wanted more weapons and newer technology than the other. And this is also the reason why it caused the MAD situation. But you still need to know that even under MAD, although it's a deterrent against war, people, they were not easily to lead to war, but it did not stop each side from trying to develop even more advanced nuclear weapons. They just keep growing and putting money in these things, right? For example, you can see here, firstly, we talk about the time when in Tehran conference, US, they informed about their success in the atomic bomb. So years later, Soviet Union also, they put efforts in the research, and then they had their first atomic bomb in 1949. But after this, US, in response to their success in atomic bomb in 1952, US, they succeed in creating the first hydrogen bomb. And also, just a year later, Soviet Union tried to catch up with them and also have their first hydrogen bomb. So this is like the tensions created by the armament race during that time. And next, the regional conflicts. So even we say that in Cold War there's no like large scale military conflicts, but you still have to know at that time we have a lot of regional conflicts, even in China, right? On various scales broke out between the two blocs, such as the Greek Civil War. We actually already talked about this. This is the reason why we have the Truman Doctrine. When Stalin tried to use his satellite state to support the Communist Party in Greece, right? This is time when US changed their foreign policy from isolationist policy to a huge involvement of different affairs in Europe, right? And they start to have the Truman Doctrine and also the Marshall Plan. And also the Chinese Civil War. We'll talk about this later. The Korean War and the Vietnam War. So the US and USSR, they intervened militarily, even though they didn't directly fighting each other, but their support to these countries, to the different sides in these countries actually lead to like great tensions in the world. You can see these are all the Cold War hotspots, right? That means their hotspot means it's not like a Wi-Fi hotspot, okay? It's like the time when they were having regional conflicts. You can see it it's around the world in most of the continent, right? Next, it's about the rivalries in propaganda. So you have to see at that time, both sides, they use propaganda to create the worst possible image of the other side and ensure that the national public opinion support the government. That means on one side, they try to create a bad image on the other side while they create a very positive image on their side to gain support from the people, right? So the two blocs, they often use mass media to promote their own political ideas and attack on the other side. So you need to see this kind of propaganda actually not only those posters, also include, for example, radio broadcasts, radio programs, TV programs, newspapers. Nowadays we have Facebook, Twitter, online platforms, all different things. These are all used as propagandas, even in nowadays, right? This is like example, communists seek more slaves, right? So it's obvious that they're trying to create bad image of the USSR. While on the other side, you can see this is from USSR, because you can see as the dark cloud loom over the USA, the USSR base in glorious sunshine while he's smiling happily, right? So you can see the black thermometer shows the American industry rate. That means their industry is like very bad compared to here, like it's minus 22%, right? While on the other side, for the Soviet industry rate is like in red color, a very positive color, and it's like more than a positive 20%, right? The information box at the bottom actually tells of American economic crisis. So in this propaganda, they are also trying to bring like a bad image of the US to show people that they were suffering an economic crisis, don't believe in them. And also we were having some like economic supremacy compared to US, right? This cartoon's name actually was Same Year but Different Weather. While we were like based in sunshine, while on the other side they have lightning, they have like dark clouds, right? So next, spying activities. Both blocs, they carry out spies and counter-spies activities in order to collect intelligence. This is a time when they spied on each other. This was mainly to find out, like, for example, any military developments, right? Because they were competing with each other. They don't want one side to be too advanced than the other group, right? So they even used spies planes which could fly at a great height and take photographs on each other. So we're going to talk about this, right? The U-2 spy plan later, okay? But for here, you have to remember their spy agencies, okay? So for US, they established the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, while on the other hand, for USSR, they have their KGB, right? The Committee of State Security. So spying activities also cause deep suspicion and great sense of insecurity between both parties. They're always afraid that their like high confidential documents will be spied by the other side, right? And then stopping all kinds of communication Actually, we already mentioned this kind of feature in the containment policy. This is a time when they won't fight the other side in the battlefield. Instead, they will keep distance, and also they will stop like communication and collaborations, right? The USSR was especially anxious to prevent the people of its bloc from going over to the capitalist countries. We're going to find out something about this in the Berlin crisis and also about the Berlin War. We're going to talk about this like later in the later lessons. New blackouts was imposed, so they were stopping to communicate with each other, and no contacts with the West were allowed. Actually, they were under like strict control. So in next video, we're going to start to talk about development of the Cold War by talking about the Berlin crisis. See you in next video.